Good morning. Welcome back to Jen's Awesome Show. I am here with Ross, who is the lawyer for the Uplift DAO. Good morning.
Good morning, Jen. How are you?
Not too bad. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Glad to hear it. So tell us a little bit about you. What types of law do you practice? I know you do DAOs.
Yeah, so our firm, I'd like to start from the more general perspective and then get to the specifics, right? So our firm is a relatively small international firm that's close to full service. So the three main areas that we work in are intellectual property, corporate transactional, and litigation, business litigation of all different shapes and sizes. And then there are a number of smaller practices which are all complementary, things like immigration, employment law, tax, trust and estates, sort of estate planning, and all is very copacetic. And some of the areas we don't do, some of the practice areas we don't have, which is why we're not full service, are things like bankruptcy and public securities work, and those sorts of things that a full service firm might have. Internationally, we have a significant China practice with Chinese companies that are doing business in the U.S. and representing their interests here, as well as from the U.S. to China, and similarly in Europe. So not the entire world, but we do have a network of associates around the world for various types of things, like these cross-border transactions, or international arbitration, litigation matters, as well as in the intellectual property field. Because in intellectual property, if you're pursuing patent and trademark protection and you file for that in the U.S., that's the only place you have it unless you pursue it in other countries. And to do that in other countries, you need to have relationships with firms that do the same sort of work that we do in those countries. So it's literally a worldwide type of practice. So it's a varied and interesting type of thing. And
That's
personally,
really neat.
yeah, in terms of practicing law, which a lot of people think is pretty boring. In many respects, it is, or a lot of people think it's kind of a sleazy thing to do, especially certain types of practices are. Fortunately, we don't do any of that type of work. It's all sort of productive, mostly productive, and fairly highbrow, if you will, within the legal world. In my particular practice is a mix of intellectual property and corporate transactional work. So it's about half and half and so even on the intellectual property side, it's pursuing patent and trademark protection. It's licensing, intellectual property assets. And on the corporate transactional side, it's everything from corporate formation structuring to employee incentive plans and raising capital. And then, the best of all worlds is exiting, M&A, where people are either growing their business through acquisitions or selling their business because they're looking to ring that bell and cash in on all the hard work they put into building their businesses. Right? And so where the crypto world, the blockchain world, and the DAO world comes in is across a number of different practice areas, if you will. Intellectual property is one, corporate transactional is one, and in this particular case with the Uplift, it was an acquisition, right? It was basically the founders of the Uplift, or the people who created the world, were basically buying it from the company that had sort of, I guess, commissioned them to create it, because it wasn't in the parent company's main area of focus, and so it was a really interesting opportunity, and that's how these things work. And so, the crypto world, while it's not exactly like the rest of the world, there are quite a few similarities. It's kind of like how the internet was in the early days, where people weren't quite sure what to make of it, and everything was moving from brick and mortar to virtual. But the principles are very similar. It's just a different platform.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there anything in particular about working with specifically DAO law that appeals to you or doesn't appeal to you, or?
Well, actually, it's a fascinating new area. So, we as a firm, and most of the people in the firm are very entrepreneurial minded, and some of us have actually been entrepreneurs full on. I mean, I'm one of them. I look at my career path as being relatively unusual, and this is what I just thought was my third career. The first one was a business litigator with big law. The second one was a full-on telecom play in Central Eastern Europe. And that was a 9-year adventure right after all the changes happened when the Soviet Empire dissolved. And this is my third career doing this sort of intellectual property corporate transactional type practice. And so we are always interested in new types of structures and ways to do business in creative ways. And that's kind of what a DAO represents. It's like a new way of looking at different types of doing business, essentially. It's tailored to the crypto world, which is an interest of ours and has been for a while, for a lot of reasons, which I think we'll get into a little bit. And in fact, we're looking ourselves at leveraging DAOs as a firm in certain ways, to facilitate some of the practice areas we'd like to grow in some creative ways. So it's an area we're very interested in for all those reasons.
That's really neat. So when I think about a DAO, I sort of understand how it's different from another corporation, but in terms of legal structure, how is it different? And is there anything you'd change about that structure?
Yeah, so the main difference is how to describe this. It's kind of the ability of everyone who's involved to have a voice, right? And in the historical corporate structures like corporations and traditional limited liability companies, if you're a shareholder or in an LLC, it's a member. That's how you describe what your equity interest is. Most of those investments are passive, right? You basically invest or you participate in some other way, and then you sit back. And unless you're involved in the actual operations of the business, you don't have a role to play other than maybe once a year at an annual shareholders meeting, for example, where you get to hear what's going on and you get to elect directors if it's a corporation. And in a limited liability company, it could be anything because they're infinitely flexible on how the people who are running the business, who are either managers or member managers, they're the ones that basically run the business, and they report back to you based on whatever your operating agreement says. And that's how their the rules and responsibilities are created, in each case by the people who found the company. A DAO, on the other hand, is this way for everybody who's got a stake in the business to have a voice, because almost every issue is voted on. So that's the unique aspect of it. The downside, though, is it can become unwieldy if not managed carefully, because when you have that many chefs in the kitchen, if you will, how that can work out. Too many chefs can create a big mess, and so the challenge, I think, for this new entity, and it is a new entity because it's just getting going and it's not been around all that long, will be how to manage that reality, right? How do you manage all these different interests, if you will, and all these different voices, and so that's going to be something that's going to be challenging. And just the other day, I was chatting with my managing partner with the DAO that we are looking at potentially doing, and it's exactly that kind of issue that we're going to face, right? If we use it as part of our practice, how do we manage the people who back us financially or are involved in some other way when it comes to making the decisions on what to do with a particular legal matter, right? I mean, it's you then get into some of the areas where if you're practicing law without a license, if they're not lawyers, so there's all kinds of things that come into play. But it's a fascinating area.
That is actually quite fascinating. That's interesting. I guess you'd have to have some really solid rules about who gets to participate in what types of votes.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're running into that a bit too. I'm doing the budget stuff, and it's interesting. There do have to be some layers of who votes when.
Right.
Because otherwise
the larger the pool gets of participants, the more challenging it'll become.
Definitely. And the more challenging engagement becomes too, because particularly with budget, not everybody's interested.
Right.
I would say it's probably the least interesting part to most people. So yeah. Okay. So how did you get involved in crypto?
It started really probably about, I would say 5 years ago. About 5 years ago, I joined a larger international law firm, a full service one, because it was exactly that. I'd been with very narrow intellectual property boutique law firms that were primarily patent and trademark shops. I had a corporate transaction practice always alongside of it, but it was always limited because I didn't have the resources to pursue it. And that was fine because that was very intentional. But then came an opportunity to join this larger international firm, which was full service, which meant they did everything. And one of the things that they were focused on, especially out of the New York office, was the initial coin offering game that was being played at that time. And those who are familiar with crypto know that in that 2015 to 2020 time period, there were I don't know how many ICOs around the world, and people were trying to figure out, okay, is this a security? Is it not a security? Is it going to be subject to regulation? Do we want to do it in the U.S.? Do we want to do it somewhere outside the U.S.? What countries are going to be most favorable to it? And so having all those, getting involved in it then, as we as a firm were looking to do that type of work for our clients, alongside other sort of creative ways to raise money, because that was my perspective. It was a creative way for a client who maybe had a hard time with the traditional financing world with angels, venture capitalists, and private equity. Here was a whole new way of raising substantial amounts of money to do your business. And at the same time, the promise of that community, which I think was lost a little bit in how things have played out, was that you could actually have the ability to participate as an owner of a token, right? If it was a use token, and get remunerated for something that you were participating in a way that was really unique. And at the same time, the company could actually raise the money it needed to do its business. And then it became really just all about the currency, right? And that's, unfortunately, until the rise in NFTs, it was that kind of thing. And I think now it's gotten a little, it's matured to a certain degree, like all these sorts of things do. But my favorite approach to this was a use token that actually had a real use and a real purpose, as opposed to just something that was going to be traded for hopefully an appreciated value on some sort of open market.
I like that, and that's interesting, because that was the part of crypto that I missed. I jumped in about a year and a half ago, so yeah. So I came in and everybody was all NFT. Okay, sure. What's that?
Well, you missed risking a lot of money, making a lot of money, or losing a lot of money. So it's
yeah, it goes both ways, definitely. Yeah. So we talked before, and you said that you're not a gamer, and along with the rise of the NFT is also the metaverse. So what made you want to join us?
Well, actually, it was in the process of doing this transaction with the people from the Uplift who had done it, and again, the rise of NFTs and learning more about what that really was. So instead of, my perspective on NFTs is this is not a crypto coin the way it's subject to the vagaries of rising and falling markets. It's actually something that has subjective value for people who think there is a reason for it to have value that is not related to whether or not it rises or falls with some market. I mean, for me, the cryptocurrency world was a lot like the stock market, right? I mean, I never really understood, and I don't think anyone can really explain why a stock goes up or down, because you have this amazingly well-performing company, yet its stock still doesn't increase for whatever reason. It's all about who knows what it's about. That's the point, right? But NFTs, on the other hand, people have a reason to believe there's value there, right? And that's what this represents to me. And the Uplift is kind of this, there's this world, and the metaverse has, it's a virtual world, and it's virtual real estate, but it's actually real estate. You can think about it that way and get your mind around it that way. And in real estate, the value of real estate is determined specifically and almost always by location, right? And again, as I began to learn about some of these metaverses that were created, where celebrities were buying up plots of land, if you will, inside different types of worlds. And if you happen to have a plot nearby one of them, suddenly you had tremendous greater value than if you weren't nearby those. And that all made sense to me. And when I learned more about the Uplift and how it was operating, and that there was an existing community that already understood and cared about it, that was really interesting to me to get involved, because it seemed like it was still pretty early days. And the other thing is timing, right, with real estate. You can't time a real estate market any better than you can time the stock market. But real estate's easier to predict than the stock market, in the sense that, if it's early days and you see a real potential for growth and development, then it's a pretty good bet that if you get in there early with some stake in the ground, if you will, there's a real opportunity for upside.
I like that. And you're not the first person here to mention the whole celebrity effect. So I would like to talk about that briefly. Just one moment here.
I've got a little noise going on the outside there, so excuse me for that.
Oh yeah, no worries. There's noise is what we do. I'm just going to share my screen here and take a look at the land that you have in Etheria here. The celebrity value is definitely huge, and what we seem to have here in the Uplift is value from our community members. We've been spending a bunch of time meeting people and getting a family together of sorts, people we want in our neighborhood, and people who we think would get to know each other well and get along well and create something amazing, people who are already doing amazing things. And so, I mean, obviously, once Corey talked a bit about you, it was pretty much a done deal there. So you're here. What were you planning or thinking about building on your plot here?
Well, I mean, initially, I think that the opportunity for us, I think, is to sort of be, from a purely marketing standpoint, and from a, first there's mostly it's a financial consideration, right? I mean, if we can become the go-to law firm for people in this world and other metaverses, I think that's an incredible opportunity for us. And so what I see, at least, and I'm in the process of discussing this with my partners. I don't know that we'll have anything ready for Saturday, but what I'd love to see there is a gallery, essentially, of people can walk in and see the types of things that we do, in terms of the types of practice that we do, and then with examples, of course, with client permission of the various types of matters that we've handled, so that people get an idea of how we operate, who we are, and how we might work together. There's nothing more satisfying for me than for a client to, what I call, ring the bell, right? Somehow get an opportunity to cash out or get something they really want out of their business, whatever it might be, and that's the thing we want to feature in here is our ability to help people get there.
I really, really like that. And I think that's a great use of space too. I mean, if we have a bunch of people with ideas and starting things, for them to be able to wander around, take a look through everything you've done and say, okay, well, this is easy. There's a QR code. We found our lawyers, right?
Yeah, that would be awesome if we could figure out a way to do that.
It makes sense. It makes total sense. Well, we do actually have a QR code up here. It's on the sign over at your plot here. And if you line it up properly, then you can actually scan it with your phone and it should take you to your website. Sweet. So, yeah. And that's something, when we do the QR codes, we make them ourselves, we check them ourselves so we can verify that they go to where they're supposed to. So that's something else that we do. But yeah, I really like that. So focusing back again on the whole community thing, what do you think makes a good metaverse neighbor?
Well, I think it's an overall understanding of how the community is working, right? And being and understanding what the rules and regulations are, understanding what the purpose is, and staying true to it, right? I think that's the key, and having something interesting to offer as a way to participate, right? And I think that's the key in any one of these communities is just understanding the lay of the land, seeing, understanding what the opportunities, and then playing by the rules. Because a lot of people, one of the most annoying things in any business, whether it's a service business like law, or whether it's some other type of making a product or whatever, when people cheat or try to game the system, it just makes it more difficult and ultimately becomes counterproductive, right? So the idea is learn the rules, play by the rules, and everyone will benefit, as opposed to just this sort of zero-sum game that a lot of people play at. And that's what I think makes a good community.
I like that. And that makes a lot of sense too. I mean, if everybody's playing by the same rules, then we're more likely to do things that fit.
Well, it's it's the old ship. If your ship, if you play it right, your ship rises, but all ship rises. All
Exactly. I've heard Corey say that a few times. So a little bit more on the community here. What is the importance of being part of a strong community, both from, I guess, a business sense and a personal sense?
Well, again, it will grow. I mean, it's word of mouth is the best way for something to get more significant, and grow in a nice way. And again, you have an opportunity here to manage that growth, right? And so I think when you have a strong community, you can manage the growth in a way that is copacetic with what everybody in the community is looking to do here. And I think that I think is a really important thing, because then you have shared values that you can incorporate into that process. And without that community, with a whole bunch of different people thinking different ways, you can't get that kind of consensus. But which is going to be one of the interesting things about running this DAO is going to be, is there going to be consensus every time? And when there isn't, how do you resolve those disagreements, right? And if somebody wants to take this particular metaverse in a particular direction that maybe a certain percentage want to, then maybe a larger percentage doesn't. How do you still accommodate, at least at some degree, a significant percentage of people who want to do something a little different, and still stay within whatever the community objectives are? So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But the more cohesive the community is, the easier it is to manage all that.
That's all certainly true. Yeah, it's been interesting watching disagreements being discussed in the public channels. I think most people are willing to work toward some sort of a consensus, but everybody is always very vocal when they don't like something. And it's been really fun actually watching the shift from before the DAO, when people are just really vocal about not liking something, to after the DAO, when they've started presenting solutions and alternatives, because now they can. So
right. And that's important. I mean, it's important for everybody to know that they have a voice, even that lone voice ultimately may be correct in the beginning, but no one recognizes the correctness of it. And as long as it's not stamped out, that then can ultimately, take over the direction, which may be great for everybody. It's important not to stamp out the disparate voices entirely, right?
Yeah.
So it's but that's a challenging thing to manage.
It absolutely is. So if you could choose anybody to be your metaverse neighbor, either who would you pick, or what qualities would you be looking for?
I think what would be interesting for us would be complementary services, right? So if we could have sort of an area of the universe, of the metaverse, where people know they can come and create maybe some kind, I don't know if a mall would be the right way to describe it, because I don't like malls generally. We could create something more interesting than that.
Yeah.
But the idea of having neighbors that have complementary services to offer, that are not competitive, right, but complementary. So people need basic stuff, right? They need legal services. They need, for example, accounting services. They need, other types of professional services. And that would be kind of interesting to have around us. And then together we could then perhaps, and I'm not quite sure myself what the rules are yet about this, but how do you, can you build together with a neighbor or something, and how would you do that? I'm not sure yet, but that would be really interesting to see if we could get some neighbors that are contiguous with our plot, and then together build something that would be really interesting.
You can absolutely do that. You can whitelist other people to your plot and make a plan and build a thing, and yeah, they can whitelist you to their plot, and it can definitely be done. And when it's done right, it looks amazing.
Well, doing it right is the challenge, because that,
it is.
As a new gamer, it's not going to be me.
Yeah, well, that's part of the wonderful thing of having community. Maybe someone moves in next to you who has lots of experience, and you have lots of ideas, and it works out.
That would be really interesting.
Yeah. Well, and I noticed too, we have our accountant, Bet, I'm going to screw up her last name, Hochberger. She's our DAO accountant, so she's nearby too, so that's good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I get to talk to her next week on the show, so
excellent.
I'll know a little more. Yeah. that's kind of wrapping it up for me today. Did you have anything that you wanted to add before we take off?
Just that it's really interesting and exciting to be involved with the Uplift. I think this is really going to be an interesting evolution. Looking forward to watching and participating. Uh, and so, as a first foray into the gaming world, it's already been fascinating. I have a number of friends who have been in it, have been talking about it forever, and so I want to kind of surprise them with my acuity one of these days, after I actually get some. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, overall, it's an exciting time, and looking forward to see how the Uplift evolves.
That's absolutely delightful. Thank you very, very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Jen. Okay.
You're welcome. We'll see everybody later this afternoon. I am back with Heidi from First Family of NFTs. So